Hi everyone, it's your boy Zach, and this is the first video in a new series called Star Wars Isn't SJW. The series is going to be about all aspects of the Star Wars franchise and how it's, I was going to say, well, it's a kind of a trick question. It seems as if it's suddenly been turning SJW, but SJW elements have been inculcated into it technically from about the time of Empire, but really saw it when the original trilogy was remastered and new scenes were added in the 1990s. So anyway, you might wonder, why is the guy from Diversity in Comics suddenly doing a Star Wars series? Well, Ethan Van Sciver started doing Star Wars videos, and I was like, that's like so random or whatever. But then they started doing really good. And he started talking, he's like, there's this whole audience. And then I peeked into it and I go, well, there must be a million videos talking about how SJW have infiltrated and are ruining Star Wars. And not really. I sorted it by relevance, and Ethan's channel, which just started tackling this a couple weeks ago, is already among the top views. So just for my bona fides, I've been into Star Wars since A New Hope came out in the theaters in 1977. I stayed with it throughout the all the years since, and I've seen all the movies in the theaters. The only thing I'm really I missed out on was Star Wars Rebels, and I need to get into that. So that'll be fun to do some videos of me getting into Star Wars Rebels. But I've had these these debates, these conversations for my whole life. So now, when Ethan showed that there's an actual audience to talk about things like this, I was like, oh, great. So I talked to him. I go, I'm not stepping on your toes. He goes, no, do it. So the first topic that I'm going to start off with, and this is a conversation I've had with people in bars, online, is why I'm Team Empire. And I didn't really get to be Team Empire until I saw the prequels when they came out. And I saw the Star Wars Clone Wars, both TV shows. And I'm firmly Team Empire. And it goes down to one reason, is that what universe would you want to live in? The Star Wars universe before or after the Empire took over, or during? Because as we've seen from all the different canon, as I'm sure most of you know, there's multiple types of canon. I'll probably do a video about the different levels of canon. But the Star Wars universe, during the days of the Empire, once things had settled after a couple of years, was very, very peaceful. So much so that Luke Skywalker's main problem, besides Tusken Raiders, who were basically outside the purview of the Empire, was boredom. That was the main problem in his life. He was very, very bored. He was not living in an unstable universe that was in a protracted civil war. He was not running in a place where he was guarded or lorded over very directly. He did not live in a police state. In fact, his relationship to the Empire was mild. I would say his relationship to the Empire was probably like the average high school student's relationship to like Trump. Like, they're probably like, yeah, I hate him, but like, your life's kind of fine. You're fine, everything's fine, and you might just go join the Navy when you graduate and be in his the military that he's the commander-in-chief of, because why not? You've got other friends who would do it. When you look at especially the prequels, and then in what is the third trilogy called besides the third trilogy? I guess it's called the third trilogy. You're going to see that there's basically one era that you'd want to live if you wanted any kind of safety, stability, but also freedom. You look at the prequels and you see what looks to be a solid, universe. You had the Senate, and you had all the different planets, and there was a variety of who they would want to ally with. But you saw massive corruption. not just corruption, because people can look past corruption. You saw the worst of human traits: corruption plus arrogance plus incompetence. One of the big things that they say, and a lot of my analogies come from comics, where the SJW writers tend to be very bad, and what they'll do is they'll write really bad dialogue, then they'll have someone comment on how what the person just said doesn't make sense. It's what they think is a get out of jail free card. With Star Wars, it's quite different. When you lay out the pieces of how Palpatine was able to trick people, he was able to use their arrogance. He was able to use their own false sense of infallibility, their own false sense of moral superiority to trick them. And once they found themselves in a point where it had gone too late, they had literally had the entire universe tricked by just one crafty person. This is not. It's kind of like when they had Wakanda, and then Killmonger became the Black Panther and the king of Wakanda, and everyone in Wakanda was like, "Wait, why is our system of government basically a steel cage grudge match? Like, how did we come to this situation where any random person can come up and become our king?" Now, it wasn't as quick for Palpatine to become emperor and eventually to do away with the Senate, but I'm going to get into the Senate again. So one of the other things that I'm very firmly Team Empire, and this is in A New Hope, and it's just very brushed upon, is that Palpatine kept the Senate around for almost 20 years. So there was not this idea that you had no representatives. Now, you might say, well, they were just all figureheads, but there was no real sense of that. As you see in A New Hope in the briefing scenes, not only is Darth Vader not have a seat at the table, quite literally, but the bureaucracy is very confident in its ability to rule and to be listened to. They basically say, we have to work with the Senate has to work with us. It very much sounds like a stable universe where there are checks and balances. And why were the checks and balances removed? It was not actually a plan of Palpatine. It was in reaction to the rebellion. So you look at basically the same people with the same beliefs who ran a corrupt and unstable, very, very shaky government that was basically turned over by one guy. Then wanting to put things back and put the same people in charge. So then this brings us to, obviously the part of the original trilogy. The Empire was semi-defeated, ended up remnants of it becoming the First Order. And what do you get 20 years later? You not only do you get a worse version of the universe before the Empire, it's more incompetent, more corrupt, less of a meritocracy. The what do you call it? The Resistance lost almost their entire fleet because they basically Pearl Harbored themselves. Let's put all of our ships around this one planet. I hope nobody invents, they just blew it up a Starkiller base. Oh, right. Who are we going to put in charge? Are we going to put in the most competent soldiers, maybe hire a bunch of mercenaries, maybe try to find some older, ex-officers from the Empire? Oh no, let's do a complete, affirmative action choice of one woman and one man. And what did we find in The Last Jedi? They were literally retreating badly. Now, yes, Holdo did have a small little gambit planned that was semi-successful. Mind you, her success was losing a gigantic capital ship that would have been crucial in their war. And mind you, again, that Starkiller base was destroyed not by, a firm plan of the Resistance, but basically the random happenstance that was kind of famously popular in the original trilogy. So the other thing, going back and getting back to Luke, is that Luke talked about wanting to fight, but he was also quite into joining the Imperial Flight Academy. Now, there have been a bunch of retcons, specifically with Han Solo, and what his relationship to being an Imperial pilot was, but that was his big dream. His big dream was to go to the Imperial Flight Academy. Now, I did read up online, and I'm guessing when this was mentioned in the original trilogy and it was mentioned in the movies, there was no delineation that this was some sort of, civilian corps for just generic. It was very much, you're going to go be a pilot for the Empire. It looks like since then it's been retconned to the Imperial Flight Academy was some sort of like a civil air patrol that was just for anyone. You weren't actually joining their military, but I think that's a little politically correct retcon. Retcon, for people who don't know, is retroactive continuity. So obviously there's the more ancient eras of the Star Wars universe, but when you look at the eras, when you look at the Republic from the prequels, when you look at the Empire from the original trilogy, and you look at whatever you call the government that the Resistance is running, and what it looks like, they got a situation where there was not a decisive victor 20 years later. Who do you want to work for? You work in the original trilogy, you run your life. And remember, they didn't send any sizable amount of troops down to Tatooine until stolen Imperial property was sent there. There was very much a sense of, if there wouldn't have been an incredibly disorganized rebellion that relied on random happenstance to constantly win, and had no real plan for the victory besides going back to the corruption and incompetence and arrogance that had gotten them into everything in the first place. By the way, I am going to be rewatching Last Jedi, because the main concept of that was about incredible arrogance. So tell me what you think about this video. Did I convince you that you would rather live in the era of the Empire? Specifically the Empire that Luke grew up in. Not, when things get, more militaristic and it became more of a police state because the rebellion basically started a civil war. But what era, if you had to choose between those three eras, Republic era from the prequels, the Empire from the original trilogy, and the Resistance era from the sequels, which would you choose and why? So this video is probably going to get a lot of new people. So just a little background. I have a channel called Diversity in Comics. I also have this one, Splato del Gato. So this one, Splato del Gato, is going to be the catch-all. Diversity in Comics is for me talking about comics. This channel is going to have 3 playlists. One is going to be Hangouts, which some of the Hangouts will be talking about Star Wars, recent movies, comics. So one will just be called Hangouts, and those are live streams. The second one will be called my new series, which talks about Star Wars, which is going to be simply titled Star Wars Isn't SJW. Now, you may sound like that just sounds like a topic for a video, not a series, but there is a whole lot of stuff to unpack. One of the things I like about Star Wars is it's very rough-hewn. It's basically the Old West. It's Westerns. And there was law and order back then, but it was not the time we know of now. It was a time that prized freedom over safety. And a lot of this comes into things that are happening right now in the world. The Star Wars, the original trilogy could only have been made in the 1970s. Each group of movies, each trilogy is very, very, very firmly of its time. And it's influenced by the social mores and the culture and the beliefs of its time. So to that end, I'll be doing probably one video a day and trying to do some overlap with Ethan, who's doing a great job. He's been tackling Last Jedi, since that's, obviously the most recent one. He's also really gearing up for Solo, coming out in a couple months. So there's going to be gearing up a lot of new stuff to talk about, and there's 30 plus years of old topics. But this whole Star Wars and SJW thing, it's been brewing. It's been brewing since Empire. The thing is, they used to respond quite well. And I'll probably talk about that in the Lando Calrissian, where there's a way to respond to people saying, why aren't you more diverse? And we'll get into more of that in other videos. But since this is the first one in a series, I'm really interested in hearing where you'd like to go with this series. So like I said, this is probably going to be a crossover, bringing a lot of new people. So I'm very excited to meet a new audience. I was talking to Ethan, who does those. He does a lot of Star Wars videos on his, and he's like, it's great. It's this whole new audience that we're not talking to, and it's a lot bigger than comics, and they're really like hungry to talk about these subjects. So I'm really glad to talk about them. As you probably know, and you're going to notice, I do a very lo-fi style. A lot of my videos right now, I'm or recording in my closet because it has the best acoustics. I do a lot of videos in my car and other weird places, but it's going to be fun. So I'm really excited about bringing in a new audience, and I'll have more videos up every day. Thanks. Bye.